Shalom.
Shalom.
Go ahead, Josh.
We thank the Most High for another Sabbath. We're going into the Sabbath for this week. And another sacred Sabbath that we are commanded to keep holy in the Bible.
That's right. There's only one holy day a week, and it's tonight when the sun sets until tomorrow night when the sun sets. That's the only day in the Bible where it speaks of a holy day that we're to keep. Even the Christian church is supposed to keep it.
Uh-huh.
So,
Go on, Dad.
yeah, we're asking for you to send donations to our ministry. Please send your donations to josh.lavio@gmail.com. We don't want you to send anything where it's going to hurt your bills or hinder your paying your bills or anything like that. Just send what you can at joshua.lavio@gmail.com. We sure appreciate it. I want to share something tonight, just for 5 minutes before Josh brings a message, lesson on atheism, Josh, right? Stealing from the Most High. There's always been an agenda to destroy the true tribe of Israel that's living in America and across the world.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to listen to this very carefully out there, who's ever listening tonight. If you catch us tonight, tomorrow, or during the week. Movie promoters are all the Illuminati and the Freemasons in the world that run all music industry, right, Josh?
Mm-hmm.
You name it, the media. So, and they know for a fact who the lost children are. I mean, not the lost, the children of the Most High are in this world. And they know from what they've done and brainwashed these people that they know for a fact that they want to make money. They want money any way they can make it. So what they've done to them is force them to receive and to do and to act out these murdering movies with drugs, right? Prison, killing, prostitution. And they use the Afro-American women and men and the Hispanics to exploit you. That's what they're doing. They're exploiting you because they know you're starving for money and you'll do anything for it. But yet, the real diversion is they'll give them, right, the work, the career, and they'll make you sign your name in blood. And at the end, I wish I had time, I'll tell you all the people who have been murdered and destroyed by this occult agenda that's in this world. So remember, that's not who you are. That's to portray what the American white people in the world think you are because you play those movies. But that's not who you are. You're Hebrew. And you're not supposed to be in those films. But because of money and fame, okay, that's all, Josh.
Mm-hmm.
Shalom.
I agree. And just to add, they always portray you in parts that demean you as a people.
Mm-hmm.
Drug dealers, loose women, gang banging, effeminate men.
Right. And we can go on and on. I mean, it's just a mess. But because of brainwashing and, and knowing that, we know what they've done to the true people of the Most High and have brainwashed them for over 400 years in this country. And it's still going on. So that's something to pray about. That's something to know. It's important to know these things.
So our theme scripture for this series is 1 Peter Go to 1 Peter 3, verse 15.
Okay. 1 Peter 3:15.
That's our theme scripture for this series.
Okay. Right, okay. So tell them about the book again. Show them the book just in case we have some new listeners tonight. Okay, stealing from the Most High.
Yeah.
I got it. Okay,
So basically,
3:15. No, go ahead, Josh. Good.
So basically, I felt that it is important to be armed with answers to answer every question that may come against us as believers, especially by non-believers who believe that their worldview is correct. 1 Peter 3:15.
But sanctify the Most High power in your hearts. And now listen, hearts doesn't mean the heart that pumps blood to your brain and your arteries. Heart means your spirit and your mind. And be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks you a reason of the hope that is in you.
So we are to give answers or educated, eloquent explanations for why we believe in God. Not just to say we believe because we believe, because that's not an answer. That's just a cop-out of ignorance, really.
That's right.
There are plenty of logical reasons to believe that God exists, although that question is not cannot be scientifically proven or disproven, because God is a supernatural, timeless, spaceless being that exists outside of the testable realm of the natural realm. So you cannot disprove his existence or prove his existence physically. So all questions of the existence of God are not physical, they are philosophical.
With meekness and fear.
So
like, be humble when you speak to people, and in the fear of the Most High, because when they see that on you, they'll know you're not puffed up and you're just trying to be a teacher and something, or call yourself a prophet when there's no really prophets today. Okay.
So
having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you.
Go to 1 Thessalonians 5:23. 1 Thessalonians 5:23.
Okay.
1 Thessalonians 5 out there. 1 Thessalonians 5:23.
First, Josh? Yeah. 5. What is it? 23?
23.
23, okay. All right. 1 Thessalonians 5:23, right? And the very power of peace sanctify you wholly. In other words, fully.
Wait.
Oh, sorry, Rick.
So we understand that we must give reasons or educated explanations for why God exists, due to the fact that that is not never, or it can be, a scientific question, because as I stated, and as people who do science understand, you cannot find, or you cannot test a supernatural force, because it is beyond the natural, and science depends on the natural realm to to do tests and hypotheses and all these other things that the natural realm is dependent on science.
I'm glad you went to this, Josh. I want to expound on 2 words here too. And the very power of peace sanctify you all. Watch this. And I pray, power, your whole what? Spirit and soul, that's your mind, what? And your spirit and body be preserved blameless until the coming of the Most High.
We are a
Mashiach,
spirit
sorry.
that has a soul that lives within a body. So when you are looking at yourself in the mirror, you are not really looking at the real you. You are looking at the natural you.
That's right.
The real you is a spirit.
Awesome.
The real you is a spirit and a soul and a body.
Wow.
So our spirit is the electricity that makes us work. Our soul possesses our reason, our free will, our moral compass, and all the other, our personhood, and all the other things that make us what we are exist within us and are transcendent above us, because they were given to us from a being that made us to have these things that exist, and are not merely just things that people come up with. So we are a soul, a spirit, and a body.
Be preserved blameless unto the coming of our Mashiach. Faithful is he that calls you.
Go to Genesis
Who will do it?
2 and 7.
Genesis 2 and 7. Okay. Genesis 2 and 7. Genesis 2, 7. Everybody have it?
Uh-huh.
Ready? Oh, 7.
2 and 7.
Hold on. I got it. And the Most High Power formed man of the dust of the ground,
Uh-huh.
and breath into his nostrils, the breath of life.
So, and he became a living soul. So the breath is the spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and the soul is, again, the part of man that possesses the conscience, morality, free will, and everything that makes us a person. So now I'm going to go into the book here.
Stealing from the Most High, that's right.
I'm going to read.
You want me to read you expound?
We're in chapter 3 about,
Don't be
again,
long now. I mean, be long enough where they get this, Josh, now.
about reason.
Pay attention.
The topic tonight is reason.
And please get
R-E-S,
a pad or a pencil, please.
reason. So let me, I'll read in so you'll understand what I'm about to read about. My mind immediately goes back to 1985, a debate between a Christian, Greg Benson, and an atheist, Gordon Stein, at the University of California, Irvine. So I'm about to read a short dialogue between these two people about the topic of logic or reason, which is a part of our soul, or which is a faculty within our soul that enables us to think through things and come up with answers that make sense. So Mr. Benson starts in, do you do you believe there are laws there are laws of logic? He said, Mr. Stein said, absolutely. He says, then Mr. Benson says, are they universal, or are they agreed upon by everybody around the earth? Mr. Steen says they are agreed upon by human beings, not realizing it is just out in our nature, out in nature. So in other words, he's saying the laws of logic or reason are simply natural. Benson says they are simply conventions. Then they are. Steen says they are conventions that are self-verifying. Benson says they are sociological laws or laws of thought. They are, Steen says they are laws of thought which are interpreted by men. So basically, the problem with the argument that the atheist is bringing forth is he's arguing that logic is merely logic, essentially because people say that it is so. So the problem with that is if people say logic is non-existent, then logic would not exist, because which would destroy conversations and research and the way we think, because we depend on reason or logic to tell us the truth, which is a part of our mind that informs us about what truth is. Not what we assume truth is, but it gives us exact information on what truth is. That's why we can say people are illogical. If now, Mr. Benson says, are they material in nature? Then the atheist says, how could a law be material? That is, Mr. Benson says, the question is, I'm going to ask you. And I said, and Mr. Steen, I would say no, because laws are not material. People are material. Meaning we are made from things. Laws are not. They are transcendent above people. That's why we value them. If a law is merely what a person says, then you have no responsibility to really honor what another person says, because you can feel differently. And see, if it is true that atheism is true on the first claim, which no one can prove, so it cannot be true, that God does not exist, not only does morality that bring into question morality, but it also brings thinking into question. Because, be honest, if God does not exist, then the thoughts that go through your head are not trustworthy. There's no reason to believe anything you think. And I know no one can live that way, because we consistently believe what we think. Right? We believe what goes through our mind. Sometimes we don't we follow the things that are wrong that go through our mind, but more than likely we will make good decisions based on what we think and what we know is to be the truth. Right. Not assume to be true, but know to be truthful. But if God does not exist, and logic is merely a convention, then you have to question that you can't trust your mind, because your mind is no more. Hold on. Okay. I'm going to read this right fast to help.
Go ahead, George.
This is from earlier in the book. This was a quote in a book by an atheist called Francis Crick. He wrote, a hypothesis is that your joy and your sorrows, your memories, your emotions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than behavior of a vast assembly of mere nerve cells and their associated molecules.
Yeah.
In other words, while we think we are conscious, free, rational creatures, that is just an illusion.
Wow.
So I don't believe what this atheist says. I don't think he thinks what he says is an illusion. I think he believes what he says.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that is contradicting. That is self-defeating for him to say what he says is is an illusion, because he believes what he says. Okay, so now I'm going to read a short dialogue between Mr. Turek, the author of this book, and a person he talked to at a university. The university his name is Michael, the guy. Michael, and it starts with him. Michael says, "Can you please explain to me how something can be without time and space or matter and it to exist and if you can, explain how this is possible. Can you please demonstrate it?" Frank says, "Sure, the laws of logic. We are using them right now. They are outside of time and space, and they are not made of material." So that's true. Logic is a form of thinking. Thinking is not material. And you don't need science to show you that logic is real. But now the problem with science is if you limit reality to merely materials, what Mr. Crick, Francis Crick, the atheist, said just now that I just read, we are just, everything we feel and think is an illusion, because if materialism is true, then why believe anything you feel? It's an illusion. This conversation, this video is an illusion. We're illusions. We don't even exist. We're just molecules in motion.
That's one. That's good, Josh.
So, and nobody lives that way.
Mm-hmm.
And an atheist can't live that. See, that's why atheism as a philosophy is impossible. It's possible to believe that way, but it's impossible to live it out. I'll say that again. It's possible to believe whatever you want to, but when it comes to philosophically living, to practically living your worldview out, you cannot live out the worldview of evolution through materialism into natural selection, because it destroys the complete identity of who you are. And everybody knows that we believe what we think, we believe our conclusions based on sense. Or do they make sense? So I'll read that statement again. Sure, the laws of logic we are using them right now. They are outside of time, outside of space, and they are not made of material. Michael says, I would argue then the laws of logic really don't exist. Problem. If logic does not exist, you cannot have a conversation with somebody. And I'll read that statement again by this person. Michael says, I would argue then that the laws of logic don't exist. Frank says, so you're saying that they do exist? Michael says, no, so you're saying they do. Michael says, how am I saying they do? Because you are using the law of non-contradiction right now to say that I am wrong. Now, the law of non-contradiction says that the two opposite ideas cannot both be true at the same time in the same sense. Okay, so I'll read that again. The law of non-contradiction says that two opposite ideas cannot both be true at the same time in the same sense. So if you're saying that logic is not real, you can't use logic to argue against logic being real, because that's self-defeating. Meaning it defeats your statement to say that logic is not real when you have to use logic to explain your conclusion, your point of view. So I need some water.
Okay. Water, Josh?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So again, just if you missed what I just said.
Let me sit on the couch for a while, and then I'll come up and read for you. Not because I bent down over here doing this whole. I really hurt my back. I have to get that brace. I was supposed to go get that. All right.
Again.
Let me get water, Josh. Good. Do your thing, Josh.
I'd love to stay in chat, but you're a total.
So again.
I want to just gotta sit in the water again.
So again, the laws of
Here, Josh. Good. Put that over there.
again. So logic works. It is immaterial. It is timeless, and it is outside of space. So, and the reason that we know that logic and reason exist is because we depend on them being consistent to tell us the truth all the time. And whenever we do not act reasonably or logically, we are irrational or unreasonable. For there to be unreasonable things, there has to be an objective standard of reason or logic that precedes that statement. So whenever you say something is irrational or illogical, you are saying there is a superstanding standard of rightness, of reason and logic that is outside of us, that is transcendent above you and me. Okay? So, and everybody uses that. The agnostic, the theist, and the atheist. We all use that type of reasoning regardless of knowing the absolute necessity of what we are saying. Okay, this is page 32. First, human beings change, but laws of logic do not change. The laws of logic provide the under-changing, independent measuring stick of truth across changing time. So, again, that's true. People always change, but logic and reason are unchangeable. It is unreasonable for 2 plus 2 to equal 5, regardless of the time that you live in. It is irrational to try to put a square into a circle, regardless of where you are. It is irrational for homosexuality to be looked at as a correct view of marriage. Now, and notice that's only really a law in the United States. Other countries in the world do not accept homosexuality.
Well, most countries don't, but Israel does. A lot of countries, yeah, but not all. Iraq,
First,
forget it.
I'll start that statement again. First thing, human beings change, but logic does not change. The laws of logic provide an under-changing, independent measuring stick of truth across changing time, culture, and human belief. They are true everywhere, every time, for everyone. In fact, they are. That's why we call them laws. The laws of logic apply equally to all of us as do the laws of physics and truth. So these are unchanging things. It is irrational for you to try to make two unequal things equal, no matter where you are. That is breaking the laws of logic. If each had nothing more than the private conceptions of the laws of logic, how could communication be possible? In order for Michael to understand me and for me to understand Michael, we must be assessing something unchanging and that transcends us, yet is common to us, which exactly is what it is. Logic is common and reason is common to us because we use it, yet it transcends us because it comes from a being that made everything. There, to us, those are the under-changing material laws of logic. The laws provide the basic bridge between minds. They also provide the bridge to the outside world. Without the bridge, we're locked inside our own skulls, unable to access and make sense of the external world that we use that bridge, but we don't even invent it. In other words, absolutely. So we depend on the rules of logic and reason to understand everything that we see. That is why the rape, and although this is a moral argument, rape is unreasonable because it is defiling the personhood of somebody else. All right?
So they would come out and say, that's wrong if it happened to them, right, Josh?
No, they would say it's wrong no matter what.
No matter what.
And so without these immaterial laws of logic and reason, we are trapped within our minds, unable to make sense of anything that goes around us. Third, all debates presuppose that objective truth exists outside of the mind of each debater. So whenever you discuss or dialogue with somebody, that discussion depends on the absolute truth existing, not subjective or relative truth, but objective truth. Meaning, the only way that a debate can work is if there is an objective truth that exists that transcends the debaters. So, if God does not exist, debates are impossible, because no one can debate an opinion without an absolute truth, because both worldviews make absolute truth claims. There is a God and there is no God. Those are truth claims, regardless of the way the atheist may see that. That is a truth claim. You are making an absolute claim to truth. And you have to steal that claim of absolute truth from a God for that truth, for that claim to matter. It cannot be relative. You cannot be relative in the sense of, well, your worldview can be right and my worldview can be right. That can't work. One of the two one must be wrong and the other must be right. For that's just the way it is. That's the way it works.
Sounds cool.
All debate presupposes that there are objective truth exists outside of the minds of each debater. Each debater is trying to show that his claims are closer to objective truth than the opposite, than the opponent. Every truth claim, whether it is God exists or does not exist, requires unchangeable laws of logic. If the laws of logic were changeable, human conversations and any thought anyone conceived would be true. Even contradictory thoughts, so-called, so God exists and God does not exist, these would be both true at the same time, and in the same sense. How absurd. So if basically what he's saying is, if logic and reason are relative, the statement God exists and God does not exist is the same statement, which is absurd because those are two different statements. So there is absolute truth. Both worldviews are making clear absolute truth statements. God does not exist or God does exist. Which worldview is more consistent philosophically? Because either worldview scientifically cannot be proven.
That's why it's really difficult to dialogue with an atheist unless you know what you're talking about.
Put it another way, if the laws of logic were just inventions of the human mind, then every thought would have to be regulated as just an invention of the mind, with no fixed laws by which we could readily ground our thoughts. How we could not know anything confidently that would include other atheists and anyone else said. Finally, it is self-defeating for Michael to assert that the laws of logic are human convention or a human convention. Notice that Michael thinks his claim that is true, regardless of how human minds conceive it. In other words, his very claim relies on the laws not being human conventions. It relies on them being fixed laws independent of human minds. In fact, all truth claims rely on that. So for a truth claim to be a truth claim, that truth claim has to be objective, and meaning there has to be a being that designed these laws to work the way they do, or else they could not work. Which you want to read for me a little?
Yeah.
Just read the highlighted.
Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay. If they say all truth changes, ask them, does that truth change? If they say all, okay.
If a person asks you if truth changes, and they're making a statement of truth to them, that means to them truth is a standard of an absolute standard which cannot change.
I got you.
Read.
If they say all truth depends on your perspective, ask them, does that truth depend on your perspective?
Right.
If they say, okay, Josh.
Read.
If they say, you're just playing word games with me, ask them, is that a word game? Wow. Why is it that when I use logic, you say it's a word game? But when you use logic, you assume it's gospel truth.
Right. So
Wow.
next highlighted area.
The absolute truth is that it's impossible to deny the laws of logic without using them. They are the self-evident reasoning tools.
So they are what? They are self-evident. In
Evident.
other words, they are evident by the fact that people use them all over the earth. And you don't need a test to prove that they exist, because you know they're self-evident.
They are the self-evident reasoning tools we need to discover everything else about the world. They are self-evident in the sense that you don't reason to them. You reason from them. They are to thinking.
You don't reason to them, you reason from them. In other words, they don't come from you, they come from someone else, and you use that gift from someone else to understand what goes on around you.
Okay. They are self-evident in the sense that you don't reason to them, you reason for them. They are not thinking what your eyes are to seeing. You can't see without eyes. And you can't think without the laws of logic. All thinking, all communication, and all science depend on them.
So everything we do depends on reason and logic, or else everything would become unreasonable and illogical. Right? No, I got it. I'll these are okay. Next page, next highlight. So we can use our minds, logic, and mathematics to understand truth about the world. And what best explains the
You getting this, Tony?
insertion between
It's
our
pretty good, huh?
minds and ordinary external reality. I think the best explanation begins with the physiological theory. Realism is the belief that there are realities external to our minds that includes material and immaterial things. We can learn about the external ordinary objective reality by starting with the self-evident law of logic and then applying those laws to data we get from our senses. Okay. This has a devastating implication for atheists. It is completely nurtures their ability to argue against God for atheism if the laws of logic are grounded on nature of the atheist God. Then anytime the atheists offer the argument against God for atheism, they are actually presupposing God exists. By using reason, atheists are stealing from God in order to argue against him. So you need reason. For reason to exist, it has to come from a mind that is reasonable.
That's right.
So therefore, you cannot use reason against in an argument to disprove you cannot use logic or reason to argue against the existence of a God, because you need someone that created these things for them to work like they do and make sense. If there is no God, that everything then automatically is unreasonable and unrational and unable to ununderstandable, cannot be understood by anybody. It has to work the way it does, and the only way you can live out the rational things, reason and logic, is if those values come from a being that is timeless, spaceless, immaterial, all-powerful, all-knowing, and all good. Outside of that, these things cannot exist.
Wow. That's good, Josh. That's good. That's good, brother. It's good to know this, folks, because you're going to meet a lot of atheists.
Okay, listen to this. Atheist evolutionary biologist J.B.S. Hadlam put it this well. He wrote, "If my mental processes are determined wholly by neutrons and atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose my beliefs are true." So a biologist is a person who studies the body, bio-body. He studies the mind. He studies how our body works and our mind works. So this individual, this individual said, if my natural processes are merely determined wholly by atoms and neutrons in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my beliefs are true, which is actually true. If our mind is merely materials in motion, atoms, molecules, and neutrons, then you have no reason to trust anything you think. if that is true, everything, there is no basis of reason and logic, because you can't trust a molecule and an atom to tell you the truth, because they don't do anything. They don't have the ability to think. They don't have the ability to reason or put ideas into well-ordered sentences. So if our minds are just what this, and he's right, if my mind is merely materials in motion, there's no reason to trust anything I say as truth. There's no reason for me to live. I cannot live a life if my mind is merely this way. It makes no sense. And hence, I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. He also has no reason to trust anything he believes, including atheism or evolution. Right, so if his brain is merely molecules in motion, then you might as well not believe atheism or anything else, because everything else, according to Mr. Francis Crick, is an illusion. Your ideas, your mind, your reason, your free will, everything, your personhood is all fake. You're just dreaming it. It's just a trick playing. Your mind is tricking you to believe everything you think is an illusion. So you're not actually here right now. You're just thinking, you're just imagining it.
Wow. And they really believe that after you pass, you die like a dog or a cat. You just die. And there's no afterlife or nothing. Wow.
Atheist Francis Crick acaad of DNA affirmed Hadlam's material view really of reality. He, in a call, and again, he requotes what he quoted earlier from this atheist. He says, your joy and your sorrows, your memories and your inhibitions, your sense of personhood, identity, and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. So basically, everything you feel is an illusion. And you can't live that out. I'm sorry. Because you feel that the way you see things are real. And when you feel that someone wrongs you, you feel that objectively. You know that you have been wronged. You don't imagine that you have been wronged. You cannot live that world, that you cannot live it. You can believe that, but you can't practice that. You can't live it. Right.
Wow. I mean, they are really walking around like that. Wow, that's scary. Wow. I'm sorry. I'm just I gotta hit the show. I'm worried.
So we've beginning to understand why the faculties of logic and reason are important to the way we see the world, to the way that we understand reality and to the way we practically live our lives. Without these laws being transcendent above man, they cannot exist. If the laws of logic are merely conventions that people agree upon, that alone makes them real, then as soon as you disagree upon them, they cease to be real. And again, as we can clearly see, you cannot live that out because you depend on your mind that is more than molecules in motion and materials acting upon themselves to tell you the truth, to make sense of the world, and to think. Without these things being a created force, without these things having a beginning from a beginner, every sense of logic, reason, conversations, debates would be impossible. Because you need an absolute truth, an absolute moral standard of rightness to even debate something, to even have a conversation, or just leave it in the debate or discussion or dialogue. There has to be an absolute moral stand, absolute truth standard for you to debate, for something to be right or for something to be wrong. There must be a standard of rightness that transcends you. But you can't see it, but you depend on it being there.
Awesome.
Right?
Mhm.
So it is impossible for these things not to exist and you use them. Because if evolution through materialism, through natural selection is true, all these laws that just the laws we depend on to think and see the world reasonably have no existence. They are mere illusions that you just imagine them, because your mind is no more than molecules in motion. Your whole essence does not exist. You are just imagining yourself. And I'm sorry, you cannot live that. You can believe that, but you can't live that practically. Because you're going to get mad, you're going to be angry, and if someone does something wrong to you, you would want that action judged. For that action to be wrong, there has to be an absolute standard of wrongness for something to be wrong. Just like there has to be an absolute standard of logic and reason for something to be illogical or unreasonable. So God does not have to exist for me to know. God does not have to exist for logic and reason to be things, to be conventions. But God must exist for these conventions to be dependable and reliable to tell the truth. I'll say that again.
There it is.
God does not have to exist for the idea or the convention of reason and logic to exist. But for them to be dependable and where they can actually be truthful and dependent on to give you a conclusion on life, God must exist for those things to be dependable and trustworthy for us. So the existence of God is necessary logically for reason and logic to be things that we depend on to get truth from. We'll finish this chapter later on today when we come on again, when the Sabbath ends. So
This was good. This is really good. I'm really learning something because I do meet a lot of people like this out there in the marketplace. Not a lot, but occasionally I do run into them. And I've got at least a spirit full of some truth now from Josh. So, keep listening. Like we said before, as we learn, you learn, and, and you're going to meet them. I'm telling you, folks, and it's sad to say they're even in the Christian church. There's atheists all over. You know what atheist really is too? It's humanism. That's part of it is. And it's in the church. It's secularism. That's in the church. They don't call it atheism, but that's what it is. That was good, Josh. It's good. Hey, Tony.
So I just want to read something again and just leave out with this statement. I just want, because this is what the view of atheism and evolution and materialism teaches. It says, Mr. Crick says that your joy, again, your joys and sorrows, your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells in their assorted molecules. So that is the view of materialism finally put by an atheist. Again, and I assume that his molecules and his atoms assume that are telling him something he believes to be true. So again, he can believe that, or an atheist can believe that materialistic worldview, but you cannot live that out because you depend on your molecule, so-called, and you depend on things outside of you to tell you the truth. You don't depend on just Adam. You depend on a well-ordered mind to tell you how to live, to inform you of right and wrong, which is morals, and to understand them through logic and reason. Again, you cannot have a mind. You cannot have a Emma. Sorry. You cannot have a you can't have a mind, or let me say it like this: you cannot have these unchangeable laws unless these things were created to be the way they are. They just don't come out of nothing and happen to be trustworthy, because something that just pops out of nothing cannot be trusted. It has to be created to work the way it does. So again, we're going to close out this chapter on reason and logic, reason later on today, when we come on before the Sabbath ends. This is been a very good series so far. I'm calling it Answering the Non-Believer. So far, the answer for the topic of reason and why it is dependable is because it was created by someone or something to work the way it does. And the reason that we know that it is dependable is because we trust it to tell us the truth. We don't trust something that does not tell us the truth. And for something to be the truth, there has to be a standard of truth that is above man, which relative anything, this is what evolution breeds. Relative anything cannot exist. So you can say that you believe that things are relative, but you can't, that idea and philosophy of life is impossible to live. Because that truth is not relative to you. That truth is objectively true to you. You depend on what you believe and believe to inform you that what you think is true. So, with that said, we say shalom.
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 Thank you.